They'll catch up. The clerk will catch up. Who after Roddenberry?
Then after Roddenberry will be Mr. Bailey.
And then?
And then Mr. Black.
Is Mr. Robinson testifying this afternoon?
I don't know.
Okay. You let me know, Ed, because I'll probably take a break before if he testifies.
Judge, and just for the record, I know that my discovery deadline has passed, but obviously I can't hold it until I receive new information. And I did get a letter from Lee Robinson, and I just provided a copy to the defense.
We've received it, Judge.
All right, are we ready for the jury?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's bring them in, please. All right, our jury back, please be seated. Ms. Jensen, you may proceed.
State calls Mr. Roddenberry.
Good afternoon. Would you raise your right hand, please? Yes, sir. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give, the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you get as close to that microphone as you can in front of you?
I can. Is this okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Will you state your name, please?
My full name is Seaborn Anderson Roddenberry, Jr.
And Mr. Roddenberry, what is your occupation?
I also have other names.
Okay. What are your other names?
Okay. I do all my legal work as S.A. Roddenberry, Jr.,
Okay.
and that's the way I am at my law firm. And my nickname is Andy.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You said that you have a law firm, so can we assume you're a lawyer?
I am.
All right. And how long have you been practicing?
A little over 48 and a half years.
Okay. And what type of law do you do?
I started out with a law firm, and I was with them about 5.5 years.
Okay.
And during that time, we did a lot of real estate, wills, probate, and that kind of thing in the civil practice.
Okay. And what about after the law firm?
After the law firm, I pretty much now just do wills, power of attorneys for business and medical, and deeds, that kind of thing.
Okay.
How many estates have you probated, or how many wills have you prepared in your career?
When I was with a law firm, and since I have prepared over 3,000 wills. And as far as probates, since I left the law firm, I have completed 936 probates.
Mr. Roddenberry, did you prepare a will for Voncile Smith?
Yes, I did.
And did she have a nickname that she preferred?
She liked to be called by the nickname of Bonnie.
Okay. And when did you prepare Bonnie's will?
Her will was signed on January 9 of 2009.
Okay. And when you prepared her will back then, did you take notes?
I took some notes when she came in for a meeting, and she came in with her then husband, Richard A. Smith.
Okay.
And I took some fairly good notes, I do believe.
Very good. Now, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 383. If you'll just take a look at that and see if you recognize it.
Yes, I do.
And is that the will that you prepared for Bonnie in 2009?
It is.
Judge, at this time, I'd move it into evidence. It's also certified by the clerk.
No objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Now, Mr. Roddenberry, did Bonnie exclude anyone from that will?
Well, basically, if I could just say, she was married, first of all.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
But did she exclude anybody in that will?
She basically left everything to two sons and said she made no provision in the will for the defendant in this case, Donald Wayne Hartung.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. You have Donald Wayne Hartung Jr.
Yes.
in there. And
Yes.
what can you tell us about that?
Well, the way that I did that was an error on my part, because the last paragraph of the will, paragraph 9, she said, "I've intentionally made no provision herein for the benefit of my son," and S-O-N, Donald Wayne Hartung Jr. And by mistake, I put Jr. there, but it was for her son, and that was not for lack of love or affection, but because he has sufficient assets of his own, and I have made ample provision for him during my lifetime.
Okay. And did you review your notes to make sure that it was her son she was excluding and not her grandson?
Yeah, that was clearly her son. The error was on my part by putting Junior.
Okay.
She intended to exclude Donald Wayne Hartung, her son.
Okay. Now, in the will, Bonnie also did not provide for her grandson, correct?
That is correct.
Now, do you know if who was her husband when they came in 2009?
Her husband was Richard A. Smith.
Okay, and did Mr. Richard A. Smith predecease her?
Yes, he actually died on January 21, 2012.
Okay. Now, Mr. Roddenberry, you are aware now that Bonnie and her two sons, Richard and John, are deceased, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So who is the sole heir at law to those three estates?
The sole heir at law would be her living son, Donald Wayne Hartung.
Okay. Now, if her son, Donald Wayne Hartung, was disqualified, then who is the next qualified heir?
That would be his children.
Okay.
And as far as I understand from my notes, she only had, Donald Wayne Hartung only had one son, Donald Wayne Hartung Jr.
Okay. Mr. Roddenberry, those are all my questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So, Mr. Roddenberry, after Richard Smith, the husband, died, did Voncile Smith come back to your office to change or amend her will?
No, it was not amended or changed.
Did she come back to your office?
She may have, I don't know from my notes, but there certainly were no changes or any additional information, except her husband had died and I had to take his will and put it on deposit with the court.
Okay.
He did a will simultaneous with her.
Okay. Now, when she came to see you, and you said you prepared the will, is that correct?
I prepared the will for both Voncile H. Smith and Richard A. Smith at the same time.
What do you do after, the people come in and give you the information, correct?
That is correct initially for the
And then they
interview.
leave, and you prepare the will, and they come back to execute it, is that
That is
right?
correct.
And when you have people come back to execute the will, do they review it with you?
Well, they go over it and read it out in the reception room, and then when it is executed, only the person actually signing the will comes back, and the witnesses are myself, my legal assistant, Melinda Broom, and then one other person from outside that comes in as a witness.
But you review that will with each individual?
The one signing,
Yes, that's what I mean. The
Well,
person who's signing the will, you review it with them.
well, I say I review it with them. They read it, and if it's okay, they come back and sign it.
And you make sure that they understand it.
Well, they wouldn't sign it if they didn't understand it, I don't believe.
Sir, I'm just asking you the question, do you verify that the people understand the will when you have them executed?
As far as I know, they understand it, yes, sir.
And you check for errors in the will, do you not?
I do if I pick up on them, yes,
Okay.
sir.
And in this case, Voncile Smith signed the will you prepared for her.
Yes.
When she was there, were any of her children there?
I think her son, RT, may have come in with her. He goes by RT because his first name was Richard, and his father's name was Richard, and he goes by RT. He may have come in with her just to bring her in, but he does not, he's not involved with being there when the will is signed.
That was going to be my next question. Do you notify, or did you notify her sons of what was contained in her will?
No, that is her job to do that.
Do you know if she did that?
I do not know.
When you prepare a will, do you put it in an envelope? Like some lawyers have special envelopes they put the wills in.
Now I put them in a pretty envelope, which is the original, and then I give them a signed copy of the will, fully executed in just a regular envelope, and it says copy on it.
Okay. Do you keep the original of the will at your office?
I do not.
Do you recommend what they do with the will?
I recommend that they take it home and put it in a safe deposit box at the house, or whatever they have, like a fireproof box. I do not recommend that they go and put it in anything at a bank or a credit union or savings and loan where they have safe deposit boxes. I recommend they keep them at home.
You recommend that they keep them in a safe, locked location, is that
Well,
correct?
it doesn't have to be locked. It just needs to be something fireproof. And usually it's a box where they keep their important papers. And a lot of times they put it in a closet and they may drill that into a stud or something, but it's available to anyone that can look in there.
Okay. But you didn't give the information about the will to anyone?
About
The will? You didn't tell anybody about
No.
what the contents of the will were?
No, that's personal and private. I
Okay.
don't do that. I don't let that information out to anybody. The only person that I would let that information out to is if the person signing it says, if there's any question about it, you can talk with my husband, but I did not do that.
And in this case, there was nobody for you to talk to about the will?
Well, just my client, Voncile Smith. or
Right,
Bonnie.
other than her, you didn't talk
That's
to
correct.
anyone? Thank you, sir.
Any further?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You can step down.
Okay,
Yeah, you can just leave that there.
Okay.
You can step down whenever.
Thank you.
You're free to go.
I'm not gonna take it. That's yours. Thank you. I just wanna thank everybody for allowing me to be here today, and hopefully what I've said will kind of
Thank
clear
you.
the air a little
Thank you,
bit.
sir. Thank you, sir. Let's call your next witness.
Mark Bailey.
Good afternoon. Have a seat and I'll swear you in, sir. All right, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Will you state your name, please?
Mark Bailey.
And Mr. Bailey, do you know this defendant seated over here in between his lawyers?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Donald Wayne Hartung?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how do you know Mr. Hartung?
Through coworker, G4S Security.
Okay. In July of 2015, how long had you worked with him?
Approximately about 6 years, 7 years.
And what did you do for G4S?
I started as patrol and then ended up as dispatcher, dispatching them.
And what did Mr. Hartung do for G4S?
He drove security in the van doing out of patrols, perimeter patrols.
Now, do you know what the average hourly pay at G4S was?
Approximately $10 an hour starting.
How long did you work for G4S?
I worked for 8 years.
And were you guys, were you employees paid weekly, bi-weekly, monthly?
That would be by.
And were you ever paid in cash or was it direct deposit?
No, ma'am, mine was direct deposit.
Okay. Did you and Mr. Hartung socialize outside of work?
No, ma'am.
What about at work?
Occasionally when we patrolled together, yes, ma'am.
Now, did you invite Mr. Hartung to do things outside of work?
Invited him to go to range with me a few times. He declined each time.
Okay, when you say a range, what do you mean a
Firing
range?
range.
I'm sorry?
Firing range.
And why would you invite him to a firing range?
Interest in firearms and safety. I'm an instructor, and he was wanting just to get some out free time, I guess.
Okay. And did Mr. Hartung indicate that he owned any firearms?
We spoke of guns, but I haven't seen one with him.
Okay, and what kind of guns did you and Mr. Hartung speak of?
Mostly 9mm.
Did he talk to you, he meaning Mr. Hartung, did he talk to you about his mom?
Taking care of her and cooking for her and just doing yard work and things like that, maintenance and family things.
Did he talk to you about his brothers?
Some issues of sibling things like dislikes and likes, some arguments most of the time.
Okay, and what was the nature of those likes and dislikes?
Most of those are about financial issues, not supporting, not helping much,
He felt like his brothers weren't helping much?
weren't helping much, no.
Okay. Now, did he ever tell you that his mom favored any one of the three of them?
That would be difficult to say. He
Okay.
always seemed that he favored him.
Okay. Did he ever say anything about his older brother and where he worked?
Tell me they worked with Homeland Security, and was gone most of the time, and when he was there, he just didn't help much around the house and didn't help support with any of the food that they, he pushes food and grow and cook for them, and they seem to not do support and resupplying food, et cetera,
Okay.
and helping around the house.
Did Mr. Hartung give you the impression that he really was most supportive of his mom and not
Yes,
his
ma'am.
brothers?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mr. Hartung ever talk to you about any financial problems he was having?
Yes.
Okay, what was that?
Car, he had fender damage on his car, couldn't get that fixed and repaired. Some issues, maybe his paychecks not being enough for him. I mean, I was having trouble with that too, but
Yes, sir. I understand. And do you know what kind of car Mr. Hartung drove?
Lincoln, I believe town car. I'm not really sure. I'll say Lincoln, stick with that.
I'm sorry?
A Lincoln,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Did Mr. Hartung talk to you about his mom or his family's financial status or situation?
He gave me the impression that she was pretty wealthy and that they were living in a nice location.
Did he ever talk to you about what would happen if his mom passed away?
Yes, he said that if he got his share of the money, that he was going to quit G4S and retire.
Those are my questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Griffith?
Mr. Bailey, you said that you and Mr. Hartung worked together.
Yes, sir.
And are you aware that he got the Integrity Award at work?
No, I haven't heard of that.
You said that you would go to the shooting range. You
Yes,
meant the
sir.
gun range, right?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Hartung ever go with you?
Not with me, no, sir.
And you offered to take him?
Correct.
And this is over the 6 or 7 years you worked together?
I offered twice and he declined twice.
Okay. And did he ever say he had a gun?
He's always interested just calibers and what they can do, but he didn't say he directly had one.
Just
I
talked
haven't
about
seen
him?
one.
I said, you all just talked about him?
Correct.
And he never told you he had one?
Not that I can remember.
And did he always talk about his mom in loving terms?
Yes, always.
And you said you groused about your paycheck?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did other employees that you knew grouse about their paychecks too?
No, we were told not to discuss paychecks with each other.
Okay. Other than needing to get his town car fixed, was there anything else he complained about with money?
Not that I can remember, no, sir.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything further.
Any further?
No, Your Honor.
You're free to go, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your patience, sir.
Mhm. Okay, call your next witness, please.
William Black.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give be the true self you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please be seated.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you state your name, please?
William Black,
And Mr. Black, where are you employed?
the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Tallahassee Regional Crime Lab.
Okay, and what do you do for FDLE?
I'm a crime laboratory analyst in the firearms section.
How long have you been doing that?
I completed my training for that just over 5 years ago.
And tell the jury your education, training, and experience to hold your position.
I have a bachelor's degree in physics from Florida Atlantic University, and with FDLE for my position, I completed an 18-month training program throughout which my competency was tested in the form of written and practical examinations. The training included 6 months of supervised casework and visitation of several firearm manufacturing facilities.
And how many examinations have you conducted in your field?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Have you testified as an expert before in your field?
Yes,
Approximately how many times?
approximately 35.
Okay. I'm giving you States Exhibit 339 and 340. You'll just take a look at those and see if you recognize them.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and how do you recognize them?
By the unique FDLE case number, exhibit number, and my initials in my handwriting.
Okay, now were you asked to examine each of those exhibits?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to take States Exhibit 339 first. What is that?
It is an apparent fired bullet core.
Okay, and what is a fired bullet core?
Many bullets are jacketed, meaning that there is an outer layer of metal, typically copper, brass, or steel, surrounding a core, which is typically made out of lead. It's not uncommon for a core and jacket to separate from each other after striking an object.
Okay, and what kind of exam did you do on that core?
Visual inspection, and I also weighed it.
Okay, and what can you tell the jury about States Exhibit 339?
It is of no value for microscopic comparison.
And why not? What does that mean?
Well, when a jacketed bullet travels through the barrel of a firearm, the jacket being the outer layer is what's making contact with that surface. So the marks left by the firearm that are used for identification purposes are left on the jacket. The core doesn't touch the firearm.
Now, what is States Exhibit 340?
340 is a one fired bullet jacket.
Okay, and what is a fired bullet jacket?
It's the outer layer of a jacketed bullet.
And what type of exam did you do on that?
Visually inspected it, I weighed it, I measured the diameter of its base in order to determine the caliber class, and I also examined its rifling impressions. See, firearms other than shotguns have what's known as rifling in their barrels. Rifling refers to a series of grooves that are either cut or formed in the interior surface of the barrel in a spiral fashion in order to impart spin to the projectile. After a bullet is fired, it's left with impressions that coincide with that particular firearm's rifling. This jacket displayed 3 evenly spaced impressions that lean to the left, meaning that it was fired from a firearm with 3 grooves that twist to the left.
Okay, and then what can you tell the jury about that fired bullet jacket?
It is 38 caliber class, which includes 38 Special, 357 Magnum, 9mm Luger, and it displays rifling characteristics consistent with 9mm Luger caliber pistols by High Point.
Now, is a high point designed to eject a casing each time it's fired?
Yes.
Okay, and what is a casing?
The cartridge casing or cartridge case is the outer shell of a unit of ammunition. That unit is called a cartridge. It's what holds all the components together until until the cartridge has been fired.
Okay, and what happens if the case fails to extract or eject?
If for any reason a cartridge case fails to extract or eject, it could be left stuck in the chamber or jammed in the action of the firearm.
Now, are states 339 and 340, are they consistent with one another? In other words, that they could go together?
Well, we have no procedure for identifying a particular core to a particular jacket, but there were no indications present that they couldn't be part of the same bullet. Specifically, the core didn't seem too big or too obviously small to go with the jacket, and they both displayed, they're both consistent with being components of a hollow point bullet.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Those are all my questions.
You're welcome.
Mr. Griffin?
Hello, Mr. Black.
Hello.
You're finally going to get out of here after this. You said that what you have is a core and a jacket. Is that correct?
Yes.
A projectile and a jacket.
Yeah, a fired bullet jacket and a apparent fired bullet core.
And when you were talking about the cartridge, that's the back end or the brass part of most bullets that contain the powder and the other mechanisms that make a bullet fire. Is that
The cartridge case, yes, they're typically brass, but most often they're brass.
Now, is there a word lands and grooves
Yes,
for rifling?
yes.
What are you said the grooves are the circling part that is found on the projectile. What are the lands?
Well, lands and grooves are both in the barrel of the firearm. The grooves are the part that's been either cut or formed into that interior surface, and the land just refers to the space in between each of those grooves. So when I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So when a bullet picks up rifling impressions from the firearm, it's the lands that are actually making the impressions on the projectile.
You said in this particular case, the projectile had 3 grooves that were left leaning.
3 impressions that were left leaning.
Do any other firearms make that?
I'm not aware of any. I consulted the General Rifling Characteristic Database maintained by the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners. The only .38 caliber class firearm with 3 left rifling in that database is a 9mm Luger caliber high point model C9 pistol. Also, in my own experience, the only firearms with 3 left rifling that I've encountered were high point 9mm Lugers.
Now, High Point is a manufacturer, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
They kind of like Browning, Winchester, Kimber, all those different kinds. Is that right?
It's a maker of firearms.
And on this particular firearm, it would be what we would call a semi-automatic?
Semi-automatic pistol.
And you said that if the projectile is fired, that the casing will be ejected. Is that right?
In a semi-automatic pistol, they are designed to automatically eject a fired cartridge case after each shot.
And that's different than a revolver that has the circular mechanism that keeps the cartridge in the revolver, right?
That's right. Revolvers have a cylinder with several chambers, and the fired cartridge cases remain in those chambers until they are extracted manually.
Okay. When a semi-automatic pistol is fired, the cartridge is always expelled if it's operating properly, correct?
For the most part.
And because if you don't find the cartridge, that doesn't mean the semi-automatic pistol misfired or malfunctioned. It just means that that cartridge is missing, either lost or somebody picked it up. Is that correct?
It's possible.
With all of this being said, do those two exhibits tell you who fired that projectile?
No.
You have no idea of knowing?
No.
I don't have anything further. Thank you, sir.
Anything further?
No, Judge.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Before you go, second.